All right, here's a short video about some of the early WDW postcards. Now, I'm not going all the way back to the preview center cards here, but this one thing these have in common with the preview center cards is some of the very earliest cards that were released early on, and for a number of years after the parks opened, a lot of them were reprinted. Like some of these have 72 postmarks. There's a 74 postmark. You know, these have brown ink. There's my off. I love this one. It's a miscut card. Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse. And then there's actually, let's see. I think this Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse. Let's see. Oh, 1110207. And let's see, is the other one? I gotta have one that doesn't have the, yeah. 1110207. So there was actually a horizontal version of 1110207 and a vertical version of 1110207. Still, it was reprinted for long enough that I don't think either card is particularly rare. But also notice all these very, the early 70s printings, pretty much these brown ink backs. Whatever vendor they used, whatever specifications they had, they gave the vendor. They were pretty consistent in using these, and these all have a little solid icon at the bottom of the back of the card for the dividing line. Now, I don't remember if on these, let's see. It's pretty much all castle logos, isn't it, on these? Yeah. Whereas not like just breaking it down land by land and having a thing for each land. Now, October 71 to 1982. So these blue ink backs printed by Dexter Press. So these also fairly early, but I think it's a different printer than the black ink ones. And these do break down by land, what icon they have at the bottom of the card. There's a little wood stove, potbelly stove for Main Street, USA. That was their logo. Adventureland has a bird and leaf logo. Liberty Bell for Liberty Square. And again, these were reprinted for a number of years. Now, I think, though, as they reprinted them, sometimes there were some small changes. So let me go back to the next divider. Here, Dexter Press outline icon variants of the Florida pennant with black ink backs, 1972 to 76. So none of these had 71 postmarks. Again, the little Liberty Bell icon for Liberty Square. For the castle, see, the castle here is an outline of the castle, whereas on if you remember the brown back cards, it was a solid block, the logo was. And again, a lot of these were reprinted. It had a high number of printings of these early Walt Disney World postcards. You can find ones that are trimmed slightly different from each other. Like I've lined up some of these Mickey Mouse cards to where you can see, oh, this one's a little bit wider on this side, this is a little bit wider on that side, so you can get like almost like a little wider picture, lining them one on top of the other. And here's a sort of resort-wide logo. The resorts on the Seven Seas Lagoon and Bay Lake, I guess. Now these getting into 1976 to 1980, so these are without the Florida flag logo. So by the time we got further into the 70s, it's like, okay, we're familiar, everybody's pretty much familiar with the fact that Disney World's in Florida. We don't have to have that little Florida pennant on all the cards. So these are a little bit later printings of the same thing. Again, I don't think too many of these are particularly rare. Certainly you don't see as many, I don't know. There are ones you see a lot more of. Certainly any castle view you're going to see a bunch of. Anything that's an individual attraction like the Haunted Mansion maybe is a little bit less common, but still there were a lot of them. The Mickey Mouse Review, characters in front of the castle. So that took you up, you know, almost to the opening of Epcot. This is pretty much, you were in standard size postcards still at the Magic Kingdom and the resorts around Magic Kingdom. Let's see what Fort Wilderness logo is on them. Actually, that's interesting. That Fort Wilderness card, instead of coming up with a different logo to put on the bottom, they just didn't put a logo there. That's probably one of the only ones that doesn't have a logo at the bottom of the back of the card. Anyhow, that's just a short video on some of the standard size postcards of Walt Disney World. There's a lot more variation as you get further on, and you know, I think some of the harder to find cards really can be some of the ones from the 90s, where a lot of those things came out for a brief period of time. If they didn't do well, they didn't reprint them. Whereas the ones in the early 70s, they tended to stick with it a lot longer. For one thing, you didn't have computerized inventory systems, so it may have taken them longer to figure out, oh, that doesn't sell very well. And also, just postcards were more popular if you go further back in time, so there probably also weren't that many that didn't sell well. So the ones in the 90s also may have just suffered from the fact that maybe by that time some of the was starting to taper off what you could expect any given postcard to sell as a minimum number. So there's just a little bit about Disney World postcards. I don't ever really tend to think of them as something fairly rare, but again, I love to collect all the different variations. I almost go at it like a way a stamp collector goes at things, where any kind of little variation you want to have one or two examples of. So I generally, you know, if I can really find something I don't have, I'd be willing to pay a little bit better money than most people would pay for Disney World postcards, but I just don't. A lot of these early cards, people are disappointed when they find, oh, they're only a couple dollars each, or you know, that you've got. And it may have gone up some of the past several years. I haven't had to buy, since I have so many already. I haven't really had to go looking for them in quite some time. So, you know, if they are going up, great. But I enjoy them. Don't look through them always all that often, but I do have a lot of fun looking at them when I do. A friend was asking me about some of the early cards, so that made me make this video, because it just kind of, she seemed to mostly be asking about the early cards, so I thought this would answer some of those questions for her and anybody else that has these types of questions.